Imagine waking up in total darkness, the air so cold it burns the inside of your nose, and knowing that if your fire went out in the night, you might not live to see the sun. No walls, no electricity, no supermarket down the road, just you, a handful of people you love, and a winter that wants you dead. This was the reality for ancient humans, and the fact that you exist at all means they found a way to win. Let's go back, way back. Picture the world 20,000 years ago, at the coldest grip of the last ice age. Great sheets of ice, some over a mile thick, crushed down over what is now Canada, Northern Europe, and Russia. The sea level was so low you could walk from Asia into America on dry land. Vast stretches of the planet were frozen tundra and wind-swept grassland. And winter there was not the winter you know. It was months of darkness, screaming winds, and temperatures that could fill an exposed human in a matter of hours. And yet, people lived there. They raised children there. They laughed and sang and buried their dead there. The question is simple, and it is one of the greatest survival stories ever told. How on earth did they do it? It starts with fire. Fire is the single most important thing our ancestors ever controlled, and in winter, it was the difference between life and death. A hearth was not just for warmth. It was a kitchen, a workshop, a light in the endless dark, and the beating heart of the entire group. Archaeologists digging into ancient camps find these hearths again and again. Rings of blackened stone and thick layers of ash and charcoal, sometimes stacked one on top of another, proof that the same spot was used for fire over and over across many years. Some sites in Europe show hearths that were carefully built with stones arranged to hold and radiate heat long after the flames died down. Think about what that fire meant. You could thaw frozen meat. You could dry soaking wet clothing before the damp froze you from the inside. You could gather close in a circle, shoulder to shoulder, and share body heat while the wind howled outside. Losing that fire in the deep of winter, with no easy way to make a new one, could doom an entire family. So they guarded it, they fed it, they carried embers with them when they moved, cradling a living coal in moss or bark like the most precious thing they owned, because it was. But fire alone cannot save you if the cold is stripping the heat from your skin faster than the flames can give it back. And this is where ancient humans did something genuinely brilliant. They learned to wear other animals, not draped roughly over the shoulders, but cut, shaped, and sewn into fitted clothing. This is one of the most underrated inventions in all of human history, and here is the clue that proves it: the needle. Archaeologists have found sewing needles carved from bone and ivory, some more than 40,000 years old, thin and polished with a tiny hole drilled through one end for thread. Think about that. A needle means tailored clothing. It means someone sat by the fire, piercing holes in tough animal hide and pulling sinew through, stitching together sleeves and hoods and trousers that actually fit the body and sealed out the wind. Loose furs let cold air leak in at every gap. Sewn, layered clothing traps a warm pocket of air against the skin, exactly like a modern winter coat. Our ancestors figured this out on their own, with no one to teach them, using the bones of the very animals that kept them warm. And they did not stop at one layer. Evidence suggests they wore an inner layer against the skin, and a tougher outer layer to break the wind, wrapping the feet in hide, covering the hands, pulling fur hoods tight around the face so that only the eyes were exposed to the killing air. Different animals gave different gifts. The thick, hollow hairs of reindeer trap warmth beautifully. Wolf and fox fur around the face sheds frost from your breath instead of letting it freeze solid. Nothing was wasted. Every scrap of a hunted animal had a purpose, and clothing was armor against an enemy you could not fight with a spear. Now think about where you would sleep. You cannot survive a winter night in the open, so shelter became everything. Where nature offered caves, humans took them gratefully. A cave holds a steady temperature, blocks the wind, and keeps the snow off your head. And if you build a fire near the entrance, the rock walls soak up the heat and glow it back at you through the night. This is why so many of the most famous ancient sites are caves. They were the winter homes of people fighting to stay alive, generation after generation. But here's the thing: there were never enough caves to go around, and much of the frozen tundra where people hunted had no caves at all. It was flat, open, treeless grassland stretching to the horizon. So if nature would not give you shelter, you had to build it. And what our ancestors built out on that freezing plain is absolutely staggering. They built houses out of mammoths. In what is now Ukraine and Russia, archaeologists uncovered the remains of huts made almost entirely from mammoth bones. We are talking about enormous curved tusks used as arches over the doorway, massive skulls and leg bones stacked and interlocked to form circular walls, sometimes using the bones of dozens of mammoths in a single dwelling. One famous structure used hundreds of bones arranged in a careful ring. Over this bone framework, they would have stretched hides to seal out the wind, and inside they built their hearths. Picture it, a dome of ivory and bone, half buried in the snow, smoke curling from the top, a warm orange glow leaking out around the edges, while a blizzard rages across the empty white plain. That was a home. That was human beings refusing to die, engineering warmth out of the skeletons of the largest animals they had ever seen. Even simpler shelters worked wonders. A pit dug down into the earth stays warmer than the surface, because the ground itself holds heat and blocks the wind. Cover that pit with a frame of branches or bone, layer it with hides and packed snow, and you have an insulated den. It sounds crude, but snow is a surprisingly good insulator, full of trapped air, which is exactly why animals burrow into it, and why a snow shelter can be dramatically warmer inside than the deadly air outside. Our ancestors understood these tricks not from books, but from a lifetime of watching, testing, and remembering. But warmth is only half the battle. The other half is food. And winter is when food tries hardest to disappear. In the warm months, the land is generous. Berries, roots, nuts, fish, eggs, and animals everywhere. But when the snow comes, the plants die back. Many animals migrate away or vanish into hibernation, and a hungry human is suddenly staring at a frozen, empty landscape. Starvation was a constant shadow. So the smartest thing our ancestors ever did with food was to think ahead. They stored it. In the abundance of autumn, they killed and gathered far more than they could eat, and they preserved it for the lean months to come. And the cold itself, their greatest enemy, became their greatest ally. The frozen ground was a natural freezer. Dig a pit, fill it with meat, cover it over, and the permafrost keeps it from rotting for weeks or months. Some groups likely sank caches of meat into cold water or bogs, or packed it under heavy stones in the shade where it would stay frozen. They also dried and smoked their food. Hang thin strips of meat near the fire or in the cold, dry wind, and the moisture leaves it, and what remains can last a very long time without spoiling. Smoke from the hearth added another layer of protection and flavor. A well-run camp in autumn would have been draped with drying meat and fish, everyone working against the clock, because they all knew what was coming. Fat was treasured above almost anything. Fat is pure, dense energy, and in a frozen world, your body burns through fuel at a furious rate just to stay warm. The richest, fattiest parts of an animal were prizes. Bone marrow, cracked out of the bones with stones, was a concentrated hit of calories that could keep a person alive. They even boiled bones to render out every last drop of grease. When your survival depends on calories, you learn to see fat not as something to avoid, but as something close to sacred. And the human body itself is part of this story. People who live in the cold tend, over generations, to carry a little more insulating fat, and to have compact, heat-conserving builds, because a stockier body loses heat more slowly than a tall, thin one. This is exactly what we see in the Neanderthals, our tough, cold-adapted cousins who lived across Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. They were shorter and far more powerfully built than us, barrel-chested and immensely strong, their bodies shaped by countless brutal winters. They were expert hunters of huge Ice Age animals, and they survived cold that would destroy most people. And yet, hunting in that world was terrifyingly dangerous. Neanderthal skeletons are covered in healed fractures, the kind of injuries you see in people who wrestle enormous animals up close. Every winter hunt was a gamble with your life, out in the snow, tracking reindeer and horses and bison, moving in coordinated groups, driving prey toward cliffs or ambushes, because a single big kill could feed the whole group for weeks. But a broken leg out on the ice, far from the fire, was very often a death sentence. Then there was the enemy that needed no teeth at all, the cold itself, working on the body. Frostbite creeps in at the edges, the fingers, the toes, the nose, the ears, freezing the flesh until it blackens and dies. Get too cold for too long and your core temperature drops, your thinking slows, your movements fail, and hypothermia pulls you down into a sleep you never wake from. Ancient humans had no medicine for this, only prevention. Keep dry, keep covered, keep close to the fire, keep moving, and never, ever get caught far from shelter when the light starts to fail and the temperature begins to plunge. Every choice was life or death, and the people who made the wrong choice did not pass their stories on. So some of them made a different choice entirely. They left. If winter in one place was a killer, then you followed the warmth, and you followed the food. Great herds of reindeer and other animals migrated with the seasons, and human hunters moved with them, tracking the herds across the land, timing their whole lives to the rhythm of the animals they depended on. Others simply retreated from the worst of the cold when they could, moving to sheltered valleys, to coastlines where the sea kept things milder, to places where they knew from long experience that they could ride out the darkest months. This was not aimless wandering. It was deep, hard-won knowledge of the land, passed down from parents to children, a mental map of where to be and when, of which valley blocked the wind and which slope caught the winter sun, and where the herds would come. And that, in the end, may be the greatest survival tool of all. Not fire, not the needle, not the mammoth bone hut. Knowledge. Ancient humans survived winter because they could learn, remember, plan, and above all, share what they knew. A single person, dropped alone into that frozen world, would almost certainly die. But a group, pooling their skills, teaching the young, remembering the hard lessons of past winters and passing them forward, could do the impossible. They could turn the bones of a mammoth into a home, the hide of a reindeer into a coat, a spark into a hearth, and a frozen autumn kill into a lifeline that carried them all the way to spring. So the next time you feel a cold wind bite at your face, and you pull your coat a little tighter and think nothing of it, remember where that coat comes from. Remember the needle carved from bone 40,000 years ago. Remember the family huddled around a guarded ember while the ice pressed down over half the world. They stared into the longest, darkest, cruelest winters this planet has ever thrown at us, and they did not blink. They survived, and because they did, you are here, warm, alive, and free to wonder how they ever managed it at all.